This morning, investigators are analyzing additional images that law enforcement sources told ABC News the FBI recovered from Nancy Guthrie's home.
What investigators found on Nancy Guthrie's computer may explain her disappearance, and what they found is not what anyone expected. The FBI cyber forensics team had been working on her encrypted hard drive for 11 straight days. 11 days of locked files, scrambled data, and dead ends. And then the screen changed. The lead analyst leaned forward. The room went completely silent. Because what was on that hard drive didn't belong to the Nancy Guthrie anyone thought they knew. It wasn't personal photos or old emails. It was evidence of a hidden life. One her own children knew nothing about. One that had been running in secret for at least 6 months. And one that appears to lead directly to the night she vanished from inside her own locked home without leaving a single trace. Investigators now say the contents of that computer may be the closest thing they currently have to an answer. This is what was on it. A night that felt completely normal. Nancy Guthrie was brought home just before 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Law enforcement confirmed the timing, but here's what they won't confirm. Who was driving the car? Think about that for a second. In a missing persons case, if police are deliberately withholding the identity of the last person to physically be with the victim, it means that person is critical to the investigation, not necessarily a suspect, but someone who knows something the rest of us don't. Nancy stepped through her front door, and according to every neighbor on the street, nothing was off. No raised voices, no unfamiliar cars, no movement worth noticing, just another quiet night on an ordinary street. But by morning, Nancy was gone. Here's what makes it worse. Earlier that same evening, she had been with her family. Dinner, games, laughing. Everyone there said she was in great spirits. Steady voice, no tension, no arguments, no red flags of any kind. It was the kind of night you remember because everything went exactly right. Her granddaughter later told reporters that Nancy had squeezed her hand at the door and said, "I love you, sweet girl," as she left. That was the last thing anyone in the family heard her say. So, how does a woman go from a warm family dinner to vanishing from a locked house in less than 8 hours? That is the question the FBI has been trying to answer since day one. When investigators entered the home the next morning, they stopped in the doorway. The house was too clean. No broken windows, no kicked-in doors, no overturned furniture, nothing. In cases like this, that kind of silence is not comforting. It is terrifying. It means Nancy either knew the person who came inside, or she left on her own, possibly without realizing she was walking into danger. Either way, trust was the weapon, and nobody saw it coming. Local police started the search, but within days the FBI took over. Federal agents don't step into local cases unless they see something that goes beyond a single event. They walk through that house with surgical precision, cataloging every item, going through the trash, studying dust patterns on the floor. This was not a routine search. This was a federal inquiry into a disappearance that broke every expected pattern. The time frame is what haunted them most. Safe at 10 p.m., gone by sunrise. That is an impossibly tight window. Whoever did this had to be precise. They had to know exactly when to move and exactly how to leave no trace. If this investigation is already pulling you in, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because what the FBI found inside this house and inside Nancy's devices is the kind of detail that changes everything. And we're covering every update as it breaks. The FBI began to consider the possibility that Nancy's departure was planned well before that Tuesday night, even if Nancy herself had no idea. And that possibility was about to lead them somewhere no one could have predicted, straight into the digital life of a woman her family thought they completely knew. But first, they needed to understand what the house itself was hiding. 2 hours of digital silence. The FBI began running background checks on every single person in Nancy's life. Friends, neighbors, extended family, service providers, anyone who had regular access to her routine. They pulled phone records, bank statements, and her medical history. They interviewed every family member who had been at that Tuesday dinner, one by one, in separate rooms. Every story matched, every detail aligned, and somehow that made it worse. Because when there are no contradictions, no slip-ups, no cracks in anyone's timeline, it means the answer isn't sitting on the surface. It's buried deep. As the first day ended, agents stood in that empty house and took it in. Nancy's favorite chair, untouched. The pot roast recipe still taped to the fridge in her handwriting. Her morning coffee never made. The home had become a void, shaped exactly like the woman who used to fill it. And for the FBI, that void was not a dead end. It was the loudest clue they had. Now, here's where it gets dark. Once the FBI brought in their forensic technology, the house that looked so still on the surface turned out to be screaming with digital evidence. Here's what most people don't realize. Your home is always watching you. Routers, thermostats, door sensors, personal devices. They are all quietly collecting data every second of every day. Nancy's house looked untouched, but the data inside it told a completely different story. And when investigators laid that data out on a timeline, what emerged was a 2-hour window that changed the entire investigation. It starts at 2 a.m. That's when Nancy's phone stopped sending signals, just went dark. Her family said she was a heavy sleeper who never got up before 7 a.m. So the phone going silent at 2 made sense if she was asleep. But get this, the house didn't go dark. With her, at 3 a.m., the smart thermostat's motion sensors picked up movement in the kitchen. Slow movement, deliberate. Not the frantic pace of a break-in. Calm, methodical steps. Like someone who knew exactly where they were going. Nancy was supposed to be in bed. She never got up in the middle of the night, ever. So, who was walking through her kitchen at 3 o'clock in the morning? Then came 4:15 a.m. The front door opened and closed gently. No alarm triggered. Why? Because the correct security code had been entered. Let that sink in. Whoever opened that door either knew Nancy well enough to have her code, or Nancy herself opened it. This wasn't random. This wasn't a break-in. This was precise. This was planned. And that's not even the worst part. The FBI pulled the internet router logs and found a sharp spike in data usage during those same overnight hours, a time when the entire house should have been idle. That spike means someone was actively using the internet, or a device inside that house was transmitting a large amount of data to an outside location. While Nancy's phone sat dark on her nightstand, something else in that home was wide awake. Here's what's critical about this. The data wasn't just trickling out. It was a burst, a concentrated upload or download that lasted approximately 40 minutes. That is not a background update. That is intentional activity. The agents reconstructed what they call the home's digital heartbeat, the daily rhythm of device activity every house produces. Wake up, check your phone, use the microwave, turn on the TV. It's predictable, it's consistent. And when someone vanishes, that heartbeat either stops or changes in a way that doesn't make sense. Nancy's digital heartbeat flatlined at 2 a.m. But the house kept a pulse for 2 more hours. That gap, 2 hours of no phone activity from Nancy, but movement in the kitchen, internet usage spiking, and then a door opening with the correct security code. That's not a gap. That's a sequence. A sequence someone had planned carefully, and agents were now certain. The answer was buried somewhere in Nancy's devices. What they hadn't found yet was just how far back that digital trail actually went. That question would be answered sooner than anyone expected, and the answer would force investigators to completely rethink who Nancy Guthrie really was. What they found, hidden in the walls. About 2 weeks into the investigation, the FBI did something that caught everyone off guard. They came back. Federal agents don't return to a cleared scene unless something major has surfaced, but they arrived in the early morning hours with no sirens, no press, no warning. They parked 3 unmarked vehicles along the curb and entered through the side door. They stayed for nearly 12 hours. Neighbors watching through their windows said agents carried equipment cases inside all morning and didn't emerge until after dark. When they finally walked out, they were carrying several large evidence bags. Not one of them said a word to reporters camped outside. That silence told the whole story. Because when federal agents suddenly go quiet after weeks of measured public statements, it almost always means the same thing. They found what they were looking for. Or they found something they weren't expecting at all. They had brought ground-penetrating radar this time, a tool that sees through wood and concrete to find hidden voids and concealed objects. This isn't standard missing persons equipment. This is what they bring when they believe the building itself is holding secrets. They weren't just looking for Nancy anymore. They were looking for what she left behind, or what someone else tried to hide. The basement got the most attention. A finished space, small laundry room, storage area. The radar flagged an anomaly behind one of the walls. When agents opened the drywall, they found a small metal box, bolted, directly to the floor joists. This wasn't something casually tucked away. It was mounted, secured. Whoever put it there intended for it to stay hidden for a long time. Inside the box, a collection of documents, maps, and a secondary cell phone that nobody in Nancy's life knew existed. Her children didn't know. Her neighbors didn't know. The friends she played cards with every week had no idea. That phone changed everything. The FBI's forensic team spent days breaking the encryption. When they finally got through, they found hundreds of messages, all sent in the weeks before Nancy disappeared. The tone was chilling, cold, professional, transactional. The conversations referenced deadlines, financial transfers, and something described repeatedly as relocation. This didn't read like a woman talking to a friend. It read like someone receiving orders. And then there were Nancy's replies. Understood, ready. That's it. That's all she wrote back, hundreds of times. But here's where it gets deeper. The documents in that metal box weren't letters or journals. They were financial records and maps, some showing areas of a nearby state park with specific markings that matched no known trail or landmark. Names were handwritten on the backs of those maps, names that didn't belong to anyone in Nancy's circle. The FBI is tracking those individuals down, and early findings suggest many are operating under false identities. Also inside the compartment, a man's jacket, size large, with a logo on the breast pocket. It looked clean, but forensic analysis found traces of soil in the pockets. Soil that didn't match anything on Nancy's property, not even close. Lab results traced the soil composition to a region nearly 200 miles north. That's not a neighboring town. That is a completely different part of the state. Someone from far outside Nancy's world had been inside that house. They knew about the hidden compartment. They had enough access and enough time to leave a jacket behind. And nobody in Nancy's family had any idea the compartment even existed. The FBI has not released the identity tied to the jacket. They haven't revealed the logo. But what they have confirmed is that the forensic profile of the soil is being cross-referenced with known locations of interest in the ongoing investigation. And now, agents turn to the one thing that might connect all of it: the personal computer sitting on the desk upstairs, the one Nancy used every single day. What the computer revealed. When the FBI's cyber unit cracked Nancy's personal hard drive, they found browser histories that had been partially deleted, but were fully recoverable through forensic imaging software. Nancy had been visiting websites for offshore financial services, international travel documents, and foreign property listings. An 84-year-old woman, who her family said barely left the neighborhood, had been researching property in another country. That alone would have been shocking. But there was more. Agents discovered that Nancy had created multiple email accounts under variations of her name. One for financial correspondence, one tied to the encrypted messaging app, a third appeared to be used exclusively for receiving coded instructions. Short messages using phrases and references that didn't match normal conversation. The FBI's cryptanalysis team is still working to fully decipher the language, but preliminary analysis suggests it follows a pattern consistent with operational communication, the kind used when both parties know they might be monitored and want to leave as little plain language evidence as possible. In other words, these weren't casual emails. They were designed to be invisible. And get this, the person on the other end of those messages hasn't been publicly identified. But IP traces, even through VPN masking, have led investigators to servers located outside the United States. Multiple servers, multiple countries, suggesting the person behind this was not operating from a single location. The timeline investigators pieced together shows this didn't start recently, not even close. The communications on Nancy's computer began at least 6 months before she vanished. The early messages were casual, friendly, the kind of slow-burn trust building that manipulation experts recognize immediately. Small talk, compliments, questions about her day, her family, her health. It felt like genuine interest. But over weeks and months, the tone shifted, more directive, more urgent. The warmth disappeared. Nancy was being asked to move money, prepare documents, make quiet arrangements. All of it hidden from her family. All of it done in the background of a life that looked perfectly normal from the outside. The hard drive didn't just explain the hidden phone. It explained the maps, the jacket, the overnight data burst, the alarm code entered at 4:15 a.m. It pointed to 6 months of invisible preparation. And a woman who may not have understood what she had agreed to until it was far too late. Was she already gone before she vanished? Here is the question that haunts every investigator working this case, and it should haunt you too. Was Nancy Guthrie making her own choices, or had someone already taken her mind before they took her body? FBI behavioral analysts believe Nancy may have been the target of a sophisticated elder exploitation scheme. The pattern is textbook. A perpetrator identifies a vulnerable individual, builds a relationship of trust over months, gradually introduces secrecy, isolates the victim from their support network, and slowly gains control over their decisions and finances, step by step, message by message, until the victim's life no longer belongs to them. It happens more often than most people want to believe, and the victims almost never realize what's happening until it's too late, if they realize it at all. Here's what nobody expected when this case began. The fact that Nancy was using encrypted platforms, creating hidden accounts, and responding to instructions with single-word compliance doesn't suggest a woman acting freely. It suggests a woman who had been coached into obedience, guided, conditioned, step by step, message by message, until the person she was before started to disappear long before she physically vanished. And that's the cruelest part of this whole story. Nancy's family had dinner with her that Tuesday night. They played games. They heard her laugh. They had absolutely no idea that the woman sitting across the table from them had been living inside someone else's instructions for half a year. The digital evidence supports two possibilities, and both of them are devastating. Either Nancy believed she was making a choice when she walked out that front door at 4:15 a.m., a choice that had been engineered for her over 6 months of manipulation, or she didn't walk out at all. And whoever entered that house with the alarm code took her. The compliant tone of her messages suggests the first. The stranger's jacket hidden inside that sealed compartment in her basement wall suggests the second. The FBI has not ruled out either scenario. What they have confirmed is that this case has gone international. The IP addresses from Nancy's encrypted conversations, even through layers of VPN protection, led investigators to servers outside the country. The FBI is now coordinating with international law enforcement agencies across multiple jurisdictions. Leads have been followed into northern Mexico, where a nonprofit organization specializing in cross-border disappearances has begun raising awareness about Nancy's case. Volunteers have been distributing flyers and working with local authorities to determine whether Nancy, or anyone matching her description, crossed the border in the days following her disappearance. The possibility that she was taken across international lines is being actively investigated, and the involvement of foreign servers has elevated this from a local missing persons case to something with a scope her family never could have imagined. As of now, Nancy Guthrie's disappearance has entered its 4th week. No confirmed sighting, no ransom demand, no direct contact from anyone claiming to know where she is. Her family has made repeated public appeals for information. The FBI says they are pursuing multiple active leads simultaneously. But behind closed doors, agents are still working through the digital evidence, hundreds of messages, financial records, encrypted files, and a web of false identities, all telling the story of a woman who was slowly, methodically separated from her own life without anyone noticing. The person who sent those messages is still free. The servers that hosted their conversations are still running. The VPN that masked their location is still active. And Nancy Guthrie, the grandmother who taped recipes to her fridge and squeezed her granddaughter's hand, goodnight, has not been seen or heard from in 4 weeks. Was Nancy already gone before the night she disappeared? This case is not closed. It's not even close. And with every passing week, the window to find answers grows smaller. If you want to stay with this investigation as new details emerge, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because when the FBI releases their next update, we'll be here to break it down. If you have any information about Nancy Guthrie's whereabouts, contact the FBI tip line immediately and drop a comment below. What do you think really happened during those 2 hours of silence?